Good morning and welcome back to Word of Faith Speaks Out, and thank you again for joining us. We have a great program for you today. Some of you may remember we have talked about our prison ministry at the Word of Faith Fellowship, and one of our programs recently we had Douglas and DeWitt on the radio program, and they are in charge of the prison ministry at our church. And there were some other people that you've heard from, Ray and Andy, who also are part of the prison ministry. Well, today we have a very special guest, and his name is Derek Head. And Derek actually was in the prison at the Rutherford Correctional Center, and that is where he met Douglas and DeWitt from our church. And Derek's testimony is very powerful, and it's going to touch your life today. So I hope you listen very closely. As you heard, our church at one time even had up to 6 different prisons that we were a part of and ministering to. And so Rutherford Correctional Center was one of those prisons. And our church does a Saturday church service every week at Rutherford Correctional Center. And that is where we first met Derek. And eventually Derek was able to get a sponsorship where he was able to attend Sunday morning services where certain men in our church would pick him up and bring him back after church. And Derek actually did that for a year. And then Derek was released from prison in February of last year and joined our church immediately and has been there ever since then, has a great job, and God has been completely transforming his life. He is such a wonderful person to be with. Anybody who's around him loves being around him because he is just a great guy. And Derek was in prison for 25 years of his adult life for 2 different terms of prison. So most of his adult life he spent in prison. Derek grew up Muslim, and when he was in prison, he actually led the Muslim services. Interestingly, he was leading the Muslim services all the way up until when he was at the Spindale prison. And then also, Derek had an anger problem, which he will tell you about. You would never know it now. He is one of the nicest guys I know, but Derek was an extremely violent person, and he was a dangerous person, and somebody who actually the inmates feared at the prison. The guards were concerned about how to handle him. He got in trouble a lot. He was moved around from prison to prison. But all the while, something wasn't right in his heart, and he knew it, and he knew he was missing something in his heart. So let's listen to Derek, and let's hear how God has transformed his life. Derek?
Thank you, Mark. Yes, my name is Derek Head. I'm going to start at the beginning. I'm going to give you my history, but by no means do I want you to think I'm not glorifying anything I've ever done. I really don't like even talking about that dead man that I used to be, but so that you can get a full understanding of the transformation that took place in my life, I know that it's important that you at least know a little bit of the history of where I came from. I have 2 older brothers and an older sister from my father's side. My father and my mother both are from right here, Rutherford County, Forest City. My grandmother on my mother's side is from Morganton. And my grandmother and great-grandmother on my father's side is from right here, Forest City and Spindale and Rutherfordton. I have 2 older brothers and a sister from my father. And one is in Spindale, one is in Forest City, and the sister is in Florida. However, my mother had 8 of us, 4 boys and 4 girls, within 10 years. She had my sister Jura, who is the oldest, when she was 19, and she had me, which is the baby, when she was 29. So she had 4 boys and 4 girls, all within 10 years apart. So we like right behind each other in age. Now, when my mother and my father had split up, my 3 older brothers and 2 sisters were actually born right here, and they was raised in Shiloh and Asheville. Me and my other 2 sisters, the younger 2 sisters, and me, which is the baby, we were born in Washington, D.C. Now, when my mother and my father split when I was like 3 years old, my mother, she moved to Newark, New Jersey, where 2 of her sisters lived at, 2 of my aunts. And so we moved there, and we was all living in the same house, so even my first cousins, all of us was raised up like brothers and sisters, because we was all sharing the same bedroom and things of that nature. So when I was young, my cousin and them, they was in what they called the Nation of Islam. And it's the Islamic sect. It was founded by Elijah Muhammad. And they used to tell my mother, because my mother and my aunts and them, they were busy working and stuff like that. So they didn't let me take Derek to the temple. Back then at first, in the late 60s, it was called the temple. And it was temple number 25. And so they used to take me to the temple all the time. And, and that's when I was introduced to the Nation of Islam and Elijah Muhammad. Now, nowadays, you might be more familiar with one of the national representative of his, which is Louis Farrakhan. So I'm going through this, and we also had a dojo on a corner, which is a martial arts school. And the sensei was like, our babysitter. When mama and them had to go to work, they'd drop us off at the dojo, and that's what it is. So I took martial arts most of my life, until I was about 14 or 15, and then I started boxing for South Ward. And so now I'm going up in 1975 when Elijah Muhammad passed away. He was like what we called the apostle of God, the messenger of God here in America, to the lost and found and all that. So when he passed away, a lot of things took place within the nation as far as the division, who was going to take leadership since he passed away, and that type of thing. So needless to say, his son, Warf Muhammad, wound up, he took over, and he started changing everything. And I used to sell Muhammad Speaks. It was a paper called Muhammad Speaks, and I used to sell it. I was one of the top salesmen in Newark, New Jersey, down on Broad and Market at that time, in the like 74 and stuff like that. So he changed the newspaper to like I believe it first was Balalian News or something, and then a Muslim Journal and all that, and he started changing everything. The Nation of Islam structure, it was a real disciplined structure at first, and he started changing it over more towards Orthodox Islam. So when he did that, a lot of dissatisfaction rose up, and so it caused a big split, and a lot of people left the nation, my cousins and all of them included, and they went to the streets and went back, to the world. So we used to have a saying back then, and I know anybody that was familiar with the Nation of Islam at that time when it was first when it's in conception, it, was saying that like the white man's the devil, and they was teaching like hatred and things of that nature, and you the original man, So when used to have a saying that you can do no wrong to the devil. And what it implied was that, is whatever you do, anything you did to the devil, you was justified in it. We was raised up and taught to fight tyranny and oppression and injustice wherever you see it, and it was more like an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. You take one of my heads, I'm taking 10 of your heads. That this type of philosophy. We didn't believe, and we attacked the Christian church as far as turning the other cheek, and we even gave our own interpretation as to what that meant. Like I'm a child growing up in this, So I'm conditioned and trained to think this way. And I'm thinking, you saying turn the other cheek. I'm like, our definition was, it was, okay, say if I come to you humble and submissive and you punch me in the cheek, then I turn the other cheek. And when I'm turning the other cheek, I'm showing you the other side of me, the killer, the destroyer, that type. And so that's what that's how we defined and interpret turning the other cheek, showing you our other side, because we was saying that, like everything else in nature, it's a duality. You had the good and the evil. You had the healer and you had the destroyer, the killer and the giver of life, and all the two ends of the spectrum. So if I come to you and I'm humble, and then you be aggressive, then I'm going to be even more aggressive to you. We're taught to fight to the victory or the death, that type of stuff. So and so when you growing up in this type of environment, you take on a certain attitude, and the devil had me so convinced growing up entirely, even in school, and I'm getting suspended from school from fighting, and I felt justified in my own sick, twisted thoughts, thinking I'm doing God's will. You pick on an innocent person, or what they used to call in school nerds and stuff, and then you got the jocks, and they pick on them, and then I'm defending them. If you say something to them, then I'm jumping on you, and I'm thinking I'm right and justified in doing it because you picking on innocent people. And so that's how twisted my thoughts was. And I didn't realize it at the time. During all this time, I'm actually doing the work of the devil, because God doesn't pay evil with evil, and he say vengeance is his. So who am I to think that I can, to take it upon myself to dish out justice, or what I deem to be justice. So when you growing up in this type of environment and with those type of thinking, so my whole childhood coming up, anybody from any streets. Now, I split most of my time between Washington, D.C. and Newark, New Jersey. And anybody, they wasn't nice cities, and you had to fight, you had to, do a lot of things, and well, you felt you did. You probably didn't, but our ignorance at the time, we didn't know any better. So I'm growing up in this type of environment, and I'm splitting time. And at the same time, my grandparents on both sides of my family are from here, North Carolina. So I'm coming down here like in the summers and stuff like that, and spending time with them, visiting and that type of stuff throughout my whole life. So I was always, I didn't realize it at the time, but I was always an angry person. And I never understood where it came from, because, I had anything that I needed. My mother provided for anything I wanted. I had it, I was actually, spoiled, and I was the baby and I was her baby, and that, that type of, so I never understood why, and revelations, and I get to that later on, eventually came through me through Mama Jane. I passed that word of faith, because I had no idea, that this was the root cause of a lot of things that I was feeling and going through. I'm thinking I'm all right. Something wrong with the rest of it. I'm thinking I'm actually doing good deeds. So needless to say, during my tenure in the nation and stuff, I studied the Quran. I spoke Arabic. I read Arabic. I knew the Quran from Surah 1 to Surah 114 by heart, and everything. So all of this equipped me for what's going to transpire in the future, meaning eventually I did a lot of things, and got a lot of things happen. I've been in a lot of shootouts in Newark, New Jersey, Washington, D.C., Baltimore. Now, I'm in these places when Baltimore was actually Bodymore, and Washington, D.C. was Dodge City. I'm talking about these was like the murder capitals every year of the United States, during the 80s and stuff like. I'm in the middle of all of everything that's going on. So eventually, I get an incident occurred, and some people wanted to take the place and take over territory, for a person had got incarcerated, a big type kingpin, and everybody scrambling for his territory and all this type of stuff. And I get, called to do something. Now he was one of their families. It wasn't gangs then, you know what I mean? It was more like crews and turf this area and that type of stuff. And so I had orders to go in here and give him a message. You can't kill him, but just give him a message like that. So I goes in, and unbeknownst to me, the feds have him under investigation. And it's like one way in, one way out. And they, in a apartment complex, has an apartment over here. It's 3 buildings. They have one over here, and they watching him. And I just so happened to come up, and I'm dressed, and it was actually 5 of them that was there. And so as soon as I seen them, I started shooting them and stuff like that. And then I turned around, and the feds, of course, they said they identified themselves as federal agents or police officers or whatever, but doing gunplay, you don't hear any of that. Plus, they was in plain clothes, and so they shot me up, and I'm in MedStar Hospital, and I had a bullet. One of the things that I thought anyway was the bulletproof vest is what saved my life, but that's not true neither, because it wasn't until I got saved that I realized that it was God's hand on me, because these are marksmen, and not one of them shot me in the head, not one time. And you talking about an armed man shooting and all, so you trying to put him down quick, and not one of them, these marks, shot me in the head. They shot me in the stomach area, around the vest, the hand, leg, stuff like that. So I wakes up in MedStar Hospital in Washington, D.C., and I'm handcuffed to the bed, and they all standing around me, and it's blaring on the TV, everything that just happened and all that type of stuff. So this is my first incarceration. And so I go in there, I'm fighting this, what, quote, system, unquote. I got all this history with the nation, and the Nation of Islam and penitentiaries, because most of us that was in the nation either came out of prison from doing a lot of times, ex-murderers and killers and all this type of stuff. So they had a history in any institution, federal prison you go to, anywhere, where they're not to be played with, And I was a minister in the nation, leading communities. I'm talking about hundreds of people, and stuff like that, where I could give an order, to take this do something to this person. If I deemed you dangerous, or you violated any of our codes, or did something to attack one of my brothers or something in the Nation of Islam, then we didn't tolerate that. So we was like, in that sense, you look at them as one of the worst gangs in the prison, because they know the nation didn't play. You hurt one of us, we're gonna hurt all of y'all, and it's gonna be continuous. So
how many on that first time that you went to prison? How many years did you plead guilty to charges, or did you have a trial?
No, at first we was going through a trial. Now you got to understand also that these people that I shot were murderers and drug dealers. They already had pending charges. They was what I deemed in my mind, and this is how the devil works, and have you thinking that the world would be better without them, that type of stuff, like that. And so they had a history, so they was dangerous people. And I was pleading because I never been locked up before. I'm pleading self-defense, saying that they threatened me, and I know their record of murder and stuff like that, so I wasn't going to take no chances. So, they kind of understood that, but they still tried to give me 99 years at first, because they had me for 4 assault with intent to commit murders, and it actually was 16 counts, but it was 4. It was one for each person, and they had the different charges as far as assault with intent to commit murder, assault with a deadly weapon, maliciously wounding, depending on where you shot the person at, and all that, like that. And they try to find which one they can actually charge you with the stick.
How many years did you actually do time for? You mentioned they were starting you at 99 years, but what did you actually do time for that term?
Well, they sentenced me 20 years, but what they have is what they call reconsideration, and it's for like first-time offenders who first time they ever got locked up. You can, after normally 5 years, but mine was like 7 years, you can go back and go before the judge and show them all the things you accomplished while you was incarcerated, the schooling and whatever you took and things of that nature. And then the judge can decide whether he want to leave your time the same, or he can take some of it off. He can't give you more time, but he can take some off or leave it the same, because it was the first time you ever been incarcerated. So after about 7 years, I went before him for that. So what he did was, the 20-year sentence that I was under, he changed it to 12 years. So I got out in 10 years, on the 12-year sentence. It was called mandatory release, expiration date, which was July the 4th, 2000 on a Monday. But the only stipulation is, when I came here, because my family was down here, my mother and all them was down here. When I came down here, I had to report even though I wasn't on paper, as far as parole or probation or anything like that, I had to report to the parole and probation office here and let them know that a violent criminal is moving into their city, like that, and that type. So I had to do that, and then they didn't have a file on me here, so they was saying that we don't have a file on you. Could you come back next Monday, like that? And I'm like, come back for what? I'm not, this the anger in me and the aggression in me coming out of me. Like, I don't understand why I'm coming in the first place. That, that type stuff. So they eventually they got the file on me and my history and things of that nature, like that. And I mean, it wasn't like anything they can really do about it, because I'm not on paper, and it was a mandatory release expiration date. So I was down here from 2000 until 2002, and that's when this last.
You were released from this first prison term in 2000, is that right?
Yes.
And so you moved down to Rutherford County after that?
Correct.
Okay. And I see here our time is going so fast, we may have to pick this up on Monday. Just tell us just a little bit about the 2 year. How were things going for you when you moved down here?
Not so good, because it still was the old me. So I was involved in a lot of things. I was involved in a lot of things and accused of doing a lot of things, and tried to have charges against me for a lot of things, and some things couldn't be proven, or for whatever reason, and and so the 2 years I spent down here, I was in pretty much in the street and doing whatever I wanted to do, that type of stuff. And that what led to my second incarceration, when I just did the last 15 years of my life in prison. But I really would like to talk about the transformation,
Sure.
the new me, the new creature. I tried to give you a little quick history of but it's so long and extensive that we'll never really get through it. You never have enough time. But the most important thing and what I want everybody to grasp a hold of is the real transformation that took place in my life. You hear people that talk about, yeah, God transformed me, or the transformation took place in my life. And I was sharing with Mark about, and they used the illustration about the caterpillar and how it go through its metamorphosis and it becomes a beautiful butterfly. And I was telling Mark, I said, yeah, but the butterfly never goes back to being a caterpillar, and that's when it's a true transformation. If you go back to the things that you did or turn your back on God or anything, a transformation never took place in your life in the first place, because a true transformation, a butterfly could never go back to being a caterpillar,
Did you actually, you're talking about your second time now in prison, did you end up at the Rutherford Correctional Center?
Yes.
To do your time? And is that where you met some of the Word of Faith members?
Yeah. And one of the thing, and it's so strange because, with the controversy that's going on right now, is the same controversy back that was going on that led me to the Word of Faith. Because I'm looking at the people in prison with me that I knew from different camps and stuff like that. And they telling me, man, you don't want to go out there, man, this, man, that. They do this, they do that. And I'm looking at that.
Were they talking about the Word of Faith
Word
fellowship?
of Faith. Yeah, and they was the same insinuations and allegations that they using now. They used it then. They read the Huddle book and they was like, look at this and this and that. And I'm looking at them, I'm saying, I know these people are demonic. And so you telling me not to go here, that's where I need to be then. Because I know God must be there because the devil don't want me there. And they don't understand, but they gave me the ammunition to make me even desire to go to Word of Faith even more. Because I knew the characteristics of the person that was speaking to me. And so if you telling me not to go there, I gotta go now, and so that was part of the reason. The other reason is the ministers there, our Saturday church, and and the things that I was attending the Saturday church. And before I say this, now I was Muslim in all the penitentiaries in North Carolina and everywhere I did my time at. I was what they call the E-man. I led the Islamic communities, gave the kubars, the religious talks on Fridays. I even started it in Spindale. Every Friday when I first got there in 2013, and so I had a lot of, Muslim people, every camp when I go to, they'd be like, but you gonna get a kubar, you gonna get it, which is called a religious talk and stuff like that. So this is prior to me, becoming a Christian and accepting Christ as my Lord and Savior. But one of the main things I do want to illustrate that really pierced my heart, and it was Douglas, one of our pastors, our ministers at the church, and it was a Saturday church, and I got my kufi on, and Muslims know what that means, and all that on my head, and I'm in there, I'm still classified as a Muslim, and I'm listening to him, and he's coming out of Jeremiah, in Jeremiah chapter 3, where he be talking about, I chose you, an individual, not as a tribe, two out of a tribe, and all that. And it's I really need to quote it, but I don't have enough time, so I'm not going to be able to get into. But it's really powerful, and it pierced my heart. And he personalized it. He said, "I chose you, Derek, out of everybody in Spindale, you." And it just something about that had pierced my heart. And that's when I was totally convinced and convicted and put my stake in the ground and knew where I needed to be.
And you just heard from Derek Head, and we may have to hear more because I think you've heard about half his story, but maybe we can get him back here Monday and finish up. So thank you. This is Word of Faith Fellowship Speaks Out. You are learning about Word of Faith members and the wonderful things God's done for us. We now have all radio programs on our website. Now we're at 20. Go to our website, wordoffaithfellowship.org. Thank you very much.